destined to get it. Ooh, now we fucking the planet. Closing the curtains, back in the Bentley. Drip is too red, but I was about to pay. Ran it up now, you see it's my clan. Niggas be hating, watch how to stay.
Damn, bro, what you signed a deal or something today, bro?
QC Unite, man.
You said QC?
QC Unite.
That's alright right there.
This is Tyree Richardson, a 20-year-old aspiring rapper and father who would be shot 16 times in the back, head, and neck while unarmed inside his ex-wife's home, a home he had paid for, in the early morning hours of June 13th, 2022. But before we uncover how this young man's life was brutally ended, let me take you back to where this deadly love began, and we'll expose the shocking details that led to one of Maryland's most controversial self-defense cases.
Her door like whispering like, call 911, call 911, call 911. And she is who called 911.
The desperate, frantic sounds of a 911 call made by Tyree's baby mother pierced through the silence of a quiet Dunkirk, Maryland neighborhood at 3:30 in the morning. The man who pulled the trigger wasn't a stranger breaking into someone's home. This was Terrence Kenneth Yancey, a 22-year-old from Washington, D.C., who was sleeping in bed with Richardson's ex-girlfriend and baby mother, Autumn Anderson, in a home that Richardson himself had financially provided for, the rent, the utilities, everything, while his own son slept just rooms away from where his father would take his final breaths. The 911 operator's voice cuts through the chaos, asking critical questions.
Is he awake? Is he breathing? Okay, just to clarify, is he breathing? No, he's talking to me. I'm gonna. I'll get it. JD, this is 911. Do you know who shot him or where the other person is? Hello? You don't know? No. Okay. Is there a weapon there? No.
The responses that followed would paint a picture of sheer callousness displayed in those crucial moments after the shooting. Because while Tyree Richardson lay dying on the floor, bleeding out from multiple gunshot wounds with no pulse and no breath left in his body, concern was reportedly shown more for the household dog than for immediate aid to Richardson, according to family narratives that have circulated widely in the aftermath of this tragedy. Let me set the scene for you with excruciating detail, because understanding the layout, the relationships, and the circumstances leading up to this moment is absolutely crucial to comprehending just how preventable this entire nightmare truly was. Tyree Richardson wasn't some violent criminal, some dangerous gang member, or some threatening stranger lurking in the shadows waiting to harm anyone. He was a young father, a budding entrepreneur who operated a food truck called the Spot 301, bred dogs as a side business to make extra income, and poured his heart and soul into his music career under his stage name FSO Gunk, releasing tracks that reflected his personal struggles, his ambitions, and his dreams for a better future for himself and his young son. His relationship with Autumn Anderson had been, by all accounts, tumultuous and complicated, marked by passionate highs and devastating lows, arguments and reconciliations, breakups and makeups that seemed to cycle endlessly like so many young relationships do. But despite all the drama, all the conflict, all the pain that characterized their on-again, off-again dynamic, Tyree never stopped providing for the mother of his child. He had given her housing, a vehicle, and other financial support, ensuring that his son Cody would have a roof over his head and food on the table, even when his relationship with Autumn was at its absolute worst and most strained. But then Anderson began dating Terrence Yancey, and according to family accounts and court documents that would later surface during the trial, this created an incredibly tense love triangle fueled by jealousy, resentment, and unresolved emotions that would ultimately prove fatal. Yancey, who had a documented history of gun-related charges, was now living in Richardson's house, sleeping in Richardson's bed, playing father figure to Richardson's son, all while Richardson continued to foot the bills and provide financial support, because he cared that deeply about his child's well-being and stability. On April 27, 2022, Tyree's own birthday, of all days, he survived an ambush attack outside his Crofton home, an incident that was captured on Ring camera footage showing him fleeing desperately for his life.
He was getting out to hit his J. He went to the back of the car, like on the trunk, leaned against the trunk, and was about to hit his J. Now, I can clearly see him out of the window. And when he sits back to hit his J, it was like almost immediately like he just took off. Like I just seen a fast motion past the car, and I just seen another fast motion past the car. And so in my head, I'm like, what was that? And she's like, what? And I'm like, I'm just trying to get my thoughts together, like he getting chased down, like this shit's really happening.
Tyree suspected that someone close to him had set up the ambush, heightening his paranoia and his fear in the weeks leading up to his death. His girlfriend at the time describes the absolute terror of that moment, watching him run for his life while she sat frozen in the car, her mind struggling to process the reality of what was unfolding before her very eyes. So now we arrive at the night that changed everything, the night that would end Tyree's life. According to multiple court documents and witness testimonies, Richardson entered Anderson's residence in the 3900 block of Lakeside Court in Dunkirk. And here's a critical detail that the prosecution would hammer home during the trial. He entered using a known security passcode, not by breaking down doors, not by smashing windows, not through violent forced entry, but by simply typing in a code that he had legitimate access to because this was a home he had been paying for. The evidence presented at trial, along with family accounts that have been shared extensively on social media platforms like Instagram through series titled The Life and Legacy of Tyree Richardson and Road to 22, suggests that Richardson's intent that night was reconciliation with Anderson, not confrontation or violence. He wasn't coming to start a fight, nor was he armed or dangerous. But what happened next was pure, unfiltered chaos wrapped in darkness and confusion. Richardson proceeded to the bedroom where Anderson and Yancey were sleeping, and within seconds, literally just seconds, the peaceful quiet of that suburban Maryland neighborhood was shattered by the thunderous, rapid-fire sound of gunshots echoing through the house and out into the still night air. 16 shots. 16 shots were fired from a semi-automatic handgun, and according to the forensic ballistics evidence that would prove absolutely crucial during the trial, 12 of those bullets struck Tyree in the back, suggesting strongly that he was either turning to flee or already falling to the ground when the majority of the shots were fired at him from close range. But it gets even more disturbing, even more difficult to reconcile with any reasonable claim of self-defense. The forensic analysis conducted by ballistics expert Joseph Ward revealed wounds to Tyree's head and neck that were inflicted after he had already fallen to the floor, with downward bullet trajectories indicating that the shooter was standing above the victim when these final, fatal shots were delivered. Blood spatter patterns found on clothing further corroborated this reconstruction of events, painting a picture not of immediate self-defense against an active threat, but continued shooting well beyond any point where Tyree Richardson could have posed danger to anyone in that house. Autumn Anderson herself testified that she awoke to the sound of gunfire and the blinding flashes of muzzle fire illuminating the dark bedroom, saw Yancey either sitting upright or standing on the bed firing at a shadowy figure in the doorway, and recognized Richardson's silhouette even in the darkness. And here's what makes her testimony so absolutely critical. She screamed for Yancey to stop shooting as Richardson fell to the ground, clearly no longer a threat, but the shooting continued anyway. The bullets kept coming, and by the time the gun finally went silent, Tyree was dying on the floor, unarmed and defenseless. Autumn ran to her sister's room in complete panic, then rushed back to attempt CTR on Richardson, moving his body slightly in a desperate, futile attempt to save the life that was rapidly slipping away with each passing second. The 911 operator's voice provided CPR instructions over the phone, but it was already too late. Deputies arrived at the scene by 3:40 a.m., finding Richardson's body with multiple wounds, shell casings scattered across the floor. Tyree Tashawn Richardson was pronounced dead at the scene. But where was Terrence Yancey during all of this? Where was the shooter who had just emptied an entire magazine into an unarmed man? He was gone. He vanished into the night like a ghost, leaving behind the weapon, the body, the devastated witnesses, and embarking on what would become a 24-hour manhunt involving helicopters, canine units, and multiple law enforcement agencies searching desperately for the man who had just killed Tyree Richardson. According to testimony from neighbor Christopher Wilson, Yancey approached his door sometime after the shooting, barefoot and dressed in a white hoodie and pink boxers, claiming he had been the victim of a carjacking and requesting to use a phone. Wilson, however, noticed a gun-shaped imprint bulging in the hoodie pocket, felt immediately threatened by this strange man showing up at his door in the middle of the night with such an obvious weapon concealed on him, and wisely alerted police instead of providing assistance to someone who was clearly fleeing from something serious and potentially dangerous. The manhunt was extensive, thorough, and ultimately successful. Yancey was finally apprehended the next day at a BP gas station, ending his brief time as a fugitive. The trial of Terrence Kenneth Yancey began in April of 2023 in Calvert County Circuit Court, nearly a full year after Richardson's death, and from the very first day, it became abundantly clear that this case would pit two fundamentally different narratives against each other in a battle for the jury's hearts, minds, and ultimate verdict on what really happened that fatal night in June.
When we wake up, he goes to work and he'll send me a message and say, I want to encourage you today. It's those things that keep me going each day. As a parent, you should never have to bury your child.
The prosecution, led by Senior Assistant State's Attorney Christopher J. Monty, presented what they argued was an absolutely overwhelming, indisputable case of excessive force that went far beyond any reasonable bounds of self-defense. They brought over 300 pieces of physical evidence into that courtroom: ballistics reports, forensic analyses, witness testimonies, crime scene photographs, audio recordings, building brick by brick an ironclad case showing that Yancey had stood over Richardson and continued firing long after he posed any conceivable threat to anyone in that house. The defense, however, told a completely different story. Yancey testified in his own defense, claiming that he heard the door bust open in the middle of the night, saw a shadowy figure raise a hand, and fired his weapon in genuine fear, believing himself to be protecting Anderson and others in the home from what he perceived as a dangerous intruder threatening their lives. He insisted he had no idea it was Richardson until after the shooting had ended, that he acted purely on instinct and adrenaline in a moment of pure terror and confusion, and that everything he did was lawful self-defense under Maryland law. But here's where the prosecution's case became absolutely devastating to Yancey's claims of innocence and justified use of deadly force. Anderson admitted during her testimony that Yancey always has a gun on him and that he had prior gun-related charges on his record, painting a picture of someone who was always armed, ready for confrontation, and prepared to use violence when he felt it was necessary or justified. Furthermore, Anderson's initial statement to police described Richardson busting in, but she later clarified that she was asleep when Richardson entered and didn't actually witness the entry itself, meaning her initial characterization was based on assumption rather than direct observation. This was crucial because it undermined the defense's narrative of a violent, forceful break-in by someone intent on causing harm.
Yancey faced charges including first-degree murder, second-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, firearm use in a crime of violence, reckless endangerment of multiple individuals, and evidence destruction. The prosecution offered him a plea deal that would have resulted in 3 to 8 years of incarceration, but Yancey, maintaining his innocence and his belief that his actions were entirely justified and lawful, rejected the offer and insisted on taking his chances with a jury trial. On April 17, 2023, after hearing all the evidence, all the testimony, all the arguments from both sides, the jury reached their verdict. They acquitted Yancey of first-degree murder, seemingly acknowledging some element of fear or lack of premeditation in his actions that night, but they did convict him of voluntary manslaughter, 2 firearms violations, 4 reckless endangerment counts for endangering Richardson, Anderson, Anderson's sister, J.C. Cherry, and a child named Chad who was also in the home during the shooting, and 1 count of evidence destruction, charges that together carried the potential for over 40 years of imprisonment. State's Attorney Robert Harvey praised the verdict, stating it delivered justice for Richardson's family and held Yancey accountable for the excessive force he used that night. But for Richardson's mother, Lindsay, and the rest of his grieving family, the verdict felt hollow, insufficient, and woefully inadequate given the magnitude of what had been taken from them. Sentencing came on July 28, 2023, with Judge Mark S. Chandley presiding. Yancey received 18 active years of incarceration, with the requirement that he serve at least half of that sentence, 9 years, before becoming eligible for parole consideration due to the violent crime classification. Richardson's family has been vocal, persistent, and absolutely relentless in their efforts to preserve Tyree's memory and ensure that his story is never forgotten. They have created Instagram series documenting his life and legacy. They wake at 3:32 a.m. daily, the exact time of his death, in his memory. They're working on plans for posthumous music releases of his 31 unreleased songs to benefit his son Cody's future, and they've even discussed producing a biopic about his life to ensure that future generations know who Tyree Richardson truly was beyond the headlines and the tragedy.
And that's nobody but him above. Nobody. That is Tyree above, causing the havoc that he has always caused. Because he's saying, I'm not going to let you. One thing about him, he ain't play about me. Y'all can say what y'all want to say. He will go to the war about his mother.
But perhaps the most shocking revelation came when Richardson's mother, Lindsay, revealed that she'd been given anonymously over 3,000 hours of audio recordings after Tyree's death that documented Anderson's lifestyle and activities.
I was given anonymously, over 3,000 hours of recording after Tyree's death that will write her own fate. And it don't got nothing to do with Tyree. It's her lifestyle that she chose to live. You heard some of the recording, so I have no reason. I'm not making it up. I wouldn't have had a recording of her and her new boyfriend if that wasn't given to me. I wouldn't have a recording of her telling Cody ZZ, but God had a better plan, and he got a better plan for me. ZZ inspires me because it shows me how much I really mean to you.
She describes having to look at Anderson every time she brought Cody to visit, knowing she was teaching the child to disrespect his own grandmother, carrying this painful knowledge in silence while maintaining a relationship for the sake of her grandson. The family views the outcome as exposing betrayal, but falling drastically short of true justice, emphasizing repeatedly that Tyree's intent that night was peaceful reconciliation, not confrontation, and criticizing narratives that portray him as an aggressor, deserving of the violent death he received. They maintain that 18 years with potential parole at 9 is nowhere near adequate punishment for someone who fired 16 shots into an unarmed man who was turning away or falling to the ground. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.